All right, guys, welcome back to Tommy's Take. In this video, very important video, we're going to look at what recently took place. The Israeli Air Force struck some targets, some facilities in Syria, and these facilities were Turkish facilities. Particularly, it was against Abu al-Duhur air base in northern Syria near Aleppo. So we're gonna watch a video by Mario Naufel, and we'll comment as we go along. All right, so let us get started. Don't forget to subscribe, like the video, and comment.
As I've spoken to him many times before, Israeli strike on Syria.
Yeah,
I was
that's the
surprised. I've
difference.
spoken to him many times before, but I was surprised how worried he was. I want to talk
Yeah,
to you about something else. I've talked a lot about this today, but maybe just briefly on this topic, the Israeli strike on Turkey. Does that
yeah,
concern you?
a bit. It's the noise coming out of the Knesset, and that's coming out of the Prime Minister's office that should be really concerning. For people who don't know, the Israelis carried out an airstrike against a. Let me tell you something about that base, right? I used to have to monitor the Syrian Air Force for years, dull as dishwater. I mean, the Syrian Air Force for a very long time was just a shooting gallery for the Israeli Air Force. And these guys would fly up and do these aggressive MiG 23 or MiG 25 patrols over the Bekaa Valley. And when the Israelis would come do their overflights of Lebanon, these guys would just disappear. But the base that was hit, Abu al-Duhur, air base used to be their Air Force training base. It was their Air Force Academy, and it's up in the northeastern part of Syria, northeast part of Syria. That even my dog is trying to correct me. So he's saying no. It's in the northern part near Turkey, and it's near the city of Aleppo. And this, about a week ago, the Syrian Air Force started flying aircraft out of it again. They're flying ancient Su-22 fitter strike fighter aircraft from the early 1960s, just trash, and MiG 21s and some MiG 21 or two MiG 23 aircraft that are early 70s vintage aircraft, right? These planes are 50, 60, 70 years old in some instances. And the Israelis cratered that runway, went up, bombed that runway. And the story that's since come out is that the Syrians had invited the Turks to use that base as a forward staging ground for the Turkish forces in Syria. And the Turks have a relatively sizable presence in Syria, but principally to use as a buffer zone, to use Syria as a buffer zone during the Syrian civil war between the Kurds, the Iraqi Kurds, the Syrian Kurds, and their anti government forces that the Turks were backing. Jabhat al-Nusra, that's called the al-Nusra Front, the Harakat al-Tahrir al-Sham, which now the president of the country, al-Jolani, was a member of that group, which was backed by al-Qaeda when he left ISIS and joined that, and is now a suit-wearing, cigar-smoking guy, along the power players. But apparently Israel decided philosophy is there will be no other country with opposing power in Syria. And the Turks started buddying up to the Syrians. And apparently, the Turks were supposed to support the Syrians out of that base. And the Israelis decided that base will just not operate anymore. They didn't destroy the aircraft, they destroyed the runway. Now, that can be repaired. It's just that no one thought that they would fly right up there next to Turkey and bomb them, using whatever aircraft they use, whether it was F-35s or F-16s, F-15s. But the point is, then the Israeli government started making extremely aggressive statements towards Turkey. The Minister of Defense, Israel Katz, came out and made the comment that there will be no country that will be able, and this was very weird, that will be able to encroach on Israel's borders. And it's like, Israel's borders is 400 miles that way. But Israel's essentially saying they were setting themselves up to view Turkey as a power player, or let me put it this way, and a military opponent to Israel, which is very surprising because it was only 10 years ago or so that the Israelis and the Turks were tight. Israeli tourists could go to go into southern Turkey and do tourism there. They have $1 billion worth of exchange that goes through southern Turkey and to Israel. And then after that, those comments were made, I believe it was Ben Gavir made the comments that, well, it was Halom newspaper that said that the Israeli government was now planning to be prepared to strike Turkish forces in Syria or in northern Cyprus, whereas, they invaded in I believe it was 1970. Might have been 1972, and they took half of the island of Cyprus. So that in such a way that...
Just real quick to interject, this is an interesting, interesting information that we're hearing, but also like Israel is not attacking Turkey on Turkish territory. They're not attacking Turkey within its sovereign borders. So that's a huge difference here. If Israel had actually attacked a Turkish city, a sovereign Turkish territory, then that would have been a huge problem. And it would have been, it would have raised some concerns with, I believe it's Article 5 of the NATO treaty, where other NATO countries would have to respond in some way to that. As you know, Israel is not a part of NATO, but it's like it's an important ally to the United States as a non-NATO member. So the fact, and I think that's what Israel is trying to do. It's not trying to, at least for now, bomb or attack Turkey on sovereign Turkey territory within Turkey's borders, but Turkish facilities in Syria, they're going after. So yeah, let's continue.
They would be able to push back Turkish power, but not invoke NATO Article 5, which would get the 31 other nations of NATO would have to come in, fight Israel, and destroy the Israeli armed forces, right? Crazy story, but true. So then yesterday, Prime Minister Netanyahu starts making his comments. Let me see. I have... let me get my day's notes.
You're taking I just threw all my notes away because you literally have it all from the Israel Hayom report about Israel looking at ways it can strike Turkey without invoking Article 5 to...
this is what I do. We have an hour-long intelligence briefing every morning.
I know. I've seen it. And then you also know the details how they struck the airstrip in the airfield, so they didn't strike any munitions or anything as a warning shot. Also, the Americans... And Malcolm, even the Americans were not aware. Barack told me, even the Americans were not informed by the Israelis.
Oh, really? Well, Netanyahu said that it was a warning that they were delivering. And quote, so we made it so that they understood our warning better by kinetic military action in the face of Turkey. Now, another thing that was being said was they would let Erdogan have his left-wing, pro-Islamist rhetoric about this. But if Turkey does anything dynamic, Turkey does anything that's actual that Israel can detect, well, they're setting them up. So Israel's sort of acting in the role of bully, but what they're essentially saying was, and they're not essentially saying, what they said out loud was, we've taken Iran, we've taken on Hezbollah, we've taken on Hamas, we've taken on the Houthis, we can take on Turkey. And that is where they're on. Turkey has the largest army in NATO. They have a burgeoning but advanced military and air defense system. Yes, it has Russian S-400 missiles, but it also has the entirety of the NATO alliance there. So for Israel to say that they would be able to project power at Turkey, and I believe Ben Gavir's comment was Northern Cyprus isn't in Turkey. Syria isn't in Turkey. As a new strategy to confront Turkey, to make Turkey a confrontation state with Israel, is really crazy. And to use Syrian territory as the front line, which is interesting considering that the Israelis, every couple of weeks, some settlers come terrassing down the Golan Heights into Syrian villages and, Druze villages, and start acting like that's part of greater Israel. I don't know. But this is a new fight I don't think the Israelis need. Yeah, I'm going to watch that episode. That must have been fascinating.
No, it's a great conversation. I really, I've said this before, I really enjoy Tom's conversations. Now, privately, it's always more frank than, he's in a tricky position. So he has to always watch his words when we speak during interviews.
He's a diplomat.
He's a diplomat. Not only a diplomat, Malcolm, he's between Israel, Turkey, Syria, Lebanon, Iran, Trump, up north, Gulf. So I always tell him, I don't envy your position. But one thing he did tell me that because the Israeli fighter jets were going towards Turkish territory. And he reminded me of the day years ago, and you know it very well. I'm sure you covered it on your show.
The Russian shoot down.
Okay. So real quick, just to kind of discuss a few points here. This is what I think is happening here is that, first of all, Malcolm Nance, I really like Malcolm Nance. I like his perspective. He's got a lot of experience. He knows what he's talking about. But what I think, my takeaway from this is that, of course, we're seeing rising tensions between Israel and Turkey, and that's because Israel wants to have hegemony in the region. And I think they're trying to kind of get Turkey to respond, get Turkey maybe to be more aggressive. And what's really upset, we know like last year, United States and Turkey had this deal with selling, where United States was selling Turkey fighter jets. Israel was very upset with that. And they don't want Turkey to have these F-35 fighter jets. And I think by them attacking Turkey or Turkish facilities in Syria and claiming that Turkey is encroaching and coming closer to Israel's border, and Israel sees them as a threat, a potential threat, and is being preemptive, maybe because they have, quote, Israeli intelligence, right? And they have American politicians in their back pockets. So if they put on this facade, right, they put out this narrative that Turkey is being aggressive. If they put out this narrative that, well, what's Turkey doing in Syria? Why all of a sudden is Turkey in Syria? Which is not true, because Turkey has had a presence in Syria for quite some time. So, they have American politicians in their back pocket. Well, if we continue to sell F-35s to Turkey, and Turkey is using these F-35s to attack Israeli forces or Israeli facilities, then is that something that we want to do, right? That puts the American politician in a quagmire, right? In a tough situation. Of course, because Israel is our greatest ally. How can we sell weapons to the opponent of Israel? But also it's like, wait, Turkey is a NATO ally, is a part of NATO, and they're a United States ally. So this is Israel continuing to try to isolate the United States from the rest of the world. I think this is part of Israel's plan. Because Israel is already isolated. Israel has no true friends. If they have friends, it's because they buy them, or countries are afraid of being labeled anti-Semitic or getting on their bad side, which means getting on the bad side of the United States, right? But Turkey is essentially a pariah. I believe it's the most hated country in the world, and whatever support they have, their that support isn't authentic, isn't genuine, and now they're clearly trying to isolate the United States. The United States has less allies, less friends, um, is viewed in a less it is not viewed in a positive way in the world anymore. The United States is seen as a bully, and that's all because the United States is following Israel. So Israel um, really just is looking at Turkey as a potential player that can block their hegemony in the region, and I believe that's why they're looking to go on the offensive, looking to attack, and potentially this could escalate into a war. Hopefully not, though. Hopefully not. So, like I said, I believe that Israel is trying to weaken the United States alliances globally, um, and Israel wants to position itself as the only ally of the United States, and Israel wants the United States to depend on its technology, its AI, its surveillance, um, its intelligence, right? And because they want that money to keep coming in. Okay, so comment down below, guys. Tell me what you think. Do you think there's going to be a war between Israel and Turkey? What do you think the United States will do if such a war breaks out? Comment down below, subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you again next time. Peace.